I think that the through line that I hear, and we have similar backgrounds, right? And I mean, I love your sort of taking your background of branding and marketing and also layering on top sustainability and climate issues. And I always go back to, especially sort of the combination of those two things, is it boils down to empathy. And I think when I'm listening to you speaking, and I keep coming back to that just as you were talking about empathy, and I think that for me is one of the most powerful things I'm getting out of it, is meeting people from different backgrounds, walks of life, and experience that sort of inform then what we do as brand marketers and storytellers, because you have to have those background knowledge and experience and awareness of people of all sort of walks of life if you're speaking to them, if that's your demographic. And so I think that it's just an interesting, I don't know, it's not a byproduct. I think it's actually the main product, is empathetic, an opportunity to create, how do I say this, connect and create empathetic relationships, and have that background exposure. I don't know, as you were speaking, that's what I was thinking about.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about empathy. So I did a bunch of research on empathy a few years ago, and we published it in a journal we called the Brightmore Notes. It was my two ventures ago. And one of the things we talked about was that, we talk about empathy often at an individual level, kind of like one by one by one by one. You're doing empathy, I'm doing empathy. You should be more empathetic, or I'm trying to be more empathetic, or,
Hmm.
sometimes we even talk about it as a skill we can develop, right?
Right.
And there's some really interesting research, by the way, on that. If you just tell someone that empathy is a skill that can be developed,
Hmm.
just that, they don't even have to do anything. Just the fact of telling them that empathy is a skill they can develop
Like
will
reframing
actually,
that.
right, actually results in people being more empathetic. Just telling them.
Wow.
And so what the research was on was this idea that, okay, you and I, there's lots of writing and research done on individual empathy. But if you are leading a transformation of an organization, right, of some size, let's, a couple of years ago when we were doing the research, we were hearing a lot of leaders, going to their boards and saying, we have to become a more empathetic organization. And their boards would, what we'd hear from them is the boards would come back and be like, okay, what the hell does that mean?
What does that
And
mean? Yeah.
aside from telling your head of HR to go hire nice people, like, what are you going to do? And what am I going to invest in? And what's the payback? And so what we were looking at was this idea that there are things that a leader can do to actually create an empathetic organization. And so we wanted to go out and figure out, like, okay, what the hell is an empathetic organization, and how would you do it? And so in a lot of ways, Connect comes out of that research, how we've structured it. That it's the empathetic organizations don't just kind of induce their people to go be empathetic or be nice. What they're really doing, you can't control it. It's a little bit like innovation in that sense. You can't tell someone to go innovate, but you can set the stage for it. And so, what you're really trying to do is create an environment in which empathetic interactions with people who are dislike you are more likely to happen more often to some end. And so that's really what we're trying to do in a lot of ways with Climate and Capital Connect, is give people this consistent drumbeat, a way to challenge your views on whatever you're working about with credible peers around the world doing fascinating work in their own right, but who don't have a vested interest in the outcome of your work. And that's a rare thing. Leads, and they find partners and they get a role, but the goal is actually to try and just spark new kinds of conversations. And if you do that consistently over time, what you start to find is that you start to lean on this as a way to just meet people who you would never really have reason to meet. And because of the way the biases that exist in how we network, you just wouldn't. And so we're the easy way to do that. We set you up for those meetings every other week, and you just show up for a conversation with someone who's doing something fascinating somewhere in the world in climate or sustainability.